you've lived almost anywhere in Oregon, there's a good chance you've seen some of Pete Helzer's work. Pete's public sculptures range in style from these whimsical turtles at the Oregon Zoo to this highly relatable moment depicting a dog and a girl in Tualatin, to this stirring tribute to civil rights icon Rosa Parks at the bus station in Eugene.
You know, the Rosa Parks piece, that was a real honor for me. And what's interesting is that the people of Eugene have sort of taken ownership of that piece. She doesn't get vandalized so much. She doesn't get tagged so much. There's always somebody down there kind of watching out for her.
We first met the Dexter, Oregon artist in 2003. He was working on the clay bust of late Oregon author Ken Kesey and getting some pointers from Ken's daughter, Sunshine.
I also worked on the nose a little bit since we talked.
Yeah, and the only thing I could say is that it's from the side. It's still a bit. It's become kind of pointy now, and maybe it just needs just a bit more of a ball.
Here on top, on this way.
Just that right.
I'm gonna flatten it a little bit.
There. So I can come in and help Pete out with things that even him who's studying the photographs. They're just things that you wouldn't notice unless you lived with it for years and years.
With Sunshine's help, Pete's sculpture of Ken Kesey reading to his grandchildren is an iconic part of downtown Eugene. But he won't have that kind of help on this project, a bronze statue of Louis Southworth.
I think there are 3 photographs of Southworth that we know authentically is him. So this is the one I decided to use for the Southworth sculpture.
When it's finished, Pete's sculpture will be the centerpiece of a park in Waldport dedicated to this Oregon pioneer.
So here we are on the future home of Louis Southworth Park in Waldport. And when it's completed, I think it'll probably be one of, only a handful of places that are honoring a specific Black person in Oregon. Louis Southworth was a jack of all trades. He was brought to Oregon as an enslaved person in 1853, and he finds himself in this place where legally he has no rights, no opportunities, and yet he creates opportunities for himself. He was known for his fiddle playing, and after going to Jacksonville and working in the gold fields, and then going to Wairika, California for a time, the story goes that when he was in California, he played fiddle for a couple of dancing schools, for girls' dancing schools, and earnings from that are what he used to, along with the gold earnings, purchase his freedom. And then he eventually came here to Waldport, and so for 30 years, he lived on a piece of land which he claimed and was able to successfully file the Homestead Act claim for.
Louis established himself in the community, operating a ferry across the Alsea River.
He was, ferrying goods for people to build their homes, and so, just on that level, he was responsible for the town being built in a lot of ways.
Jesse Dolan grew up in Waldport, right across the way from Louis's land.
And what's amazing to me that I didn't learn, being a student here in Waldport, was that he donated land to build Waldport's first schoolhouse. He just persevered, and he was embraced by a white settler community during a very chaotic and divided time in our state's history. An incredible story, and I just couldn't believe it hadn't been told.
To Jesse, 12 acres of vacant property in downtown Waldport was the perfect spot to build a park in honor of Louis Southworth.
So I had this dream to do a life-size bronze sculpture, and I had remembered seeing this incredible bronze piece in Eugene of Ken Kesey reading a book to kids. So I did some research and found the artist's name, and I just emailed him.
Jesse's email arrived just about the time Pete was thinking about retirement.
Bronze keeps getting a little heavier every year. I'm turning 76, and then I got a call from Jesse Dolan, and I was really blown away by the vision that Waldport had for this park. We can estimate his size by the length of the bow, and they haven't changed much over the years.
With only 3 photos to work from, Pete worked with models to sculpt Southworth's dimensions and appearance. But getting from a clay sculpture to a bronze statue has a few steps. First, the bust of Southworth's head was encased in a plaster mold and filled with wax to form a wax positive. Another heat-resistant mold was then built around the wax bust.
And then that's put into what we call a burnout kiln. The wax is then melted out of that mold. That's why they call it lost wax casting. The wax gets lost.
With the wax now lost, the empty mold is ready for bronze casting.
1, 2, 3, up. Good, good landing. Okay, John, grab the bar. Up. Okay, nice and slow like last time. Here we go. There's a rush when the bronze comes out of the crucible. It looks like orange juice, you know? It's like, that's a metal, that's heavy, and yet you watch it, it's just so fluid and graceful. That's a rush. It's always been a rush. It's been a rush for 50 years. Here we go, right to the top.
In about 15 minutes, it's time for the big reveal.
Okay, we're gonna see what we got here. Then you have a bronze sculpture.
For something on the scale of the Southworth project, casting the parts is sort of the beginning, because the parts have to be assembled into a statue.
You've got welding, and you've got grinding, and you've got Dremel tool work. There are parts of it that are exciting. Bronze pours are exciting, but the foundry work is a lot of work. This is probably the most complex piece I've ever done. The reason is he's playing a fiddle, and twisting your arm around in that position, that was difficult, getting the hand to look natural. I finished the hand, I looked at it, looked fine from one angle, I'd go to another angle, it looked like he had a broken wrist. Cut it off, start over.
Keep in mind, Pete's making all these adjustments in bronze.
So it means cutting things off, putting them back together with the weld, and then grinding it down, and then texturing the surface so it matches everything else. But also, if you're a quarter of an inch off at the elbow, you're going to be 2 inches off at the fingers. So I had to make some adjustments in the wrist and the elbow to get the bow to lay across the strings.
With all the pieces assembled and the seams smoothed out, the statue is ready for a patina.
I tend to like to over patina, so I go darker, and then I work back with wire brushes and buffing pads until I get the exact color that I want. So I try to highlight the areas that are raised and leave the recessed areas a little darker, and that gives them much more depth and more sort of, well, I like to think of it as more lifelike features. All right, let's try to lift it. 1, 2, 3, go. You guys are doing great. Set him up, got a little over here. Got a couple right there, perfect here. Louis Southworth.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Jesse.
Thank you all so much for being here. It's such an exciting day for the city of Waldport.
It's satisfying on so many different levels to see this project come together. It's really overdue. Knowing the story of Louis Southworth has really deepened my connection to this place.
No doubt Louis Southworth was a remarkable individual, but his story is not an individual story. It is the story of every 19th century Black American who made a life for themselves in Oregon in the face of legalized inequality. And it is the story of those who fought against that inequality because they recognized the goodness in those who were different from them. Our ancestors knew that ordinary people could make a difference.
So to have a park honoring him shows people that, yes, Black people have lived in Oregon, Black people still live in Oregon. Having named places is a way to honor our ancestors and demonstrate what communities value.
All right, ready? 1, 2, 3.
Working on this project, it's just been a real uplifting experience from the very start. He was clearly a fascinating character. And the other thing I wonder about often is whether my ancestors knew him, because he lived about 18 miles from where my ancestors were farming. So there's a good chance if they didn't know him personally, they would have known of him. So I feel all kinds of fellowship with Louis Southworth. I'm selective about who I memorialize. They have to be significant to me in some way. I also try to stay within the Pacific Northwest, within Oregon mostly. So it's like developing and participating in creation of a sense of place. And I think that's where it becomes important to me as a person.